Most people who feel stuck don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're visualizing, they're affirming, they're trying to stay positive, they're learning, they're growing, and yet their life keeps producing the same results. Not worse, not better, just familiar. And that's what makes it frustrating. Because when something isn't working, but you can't see what you're doing wrong, you start to assume the problem must be you. Maybe I'm not consistent enough. Maybe I don't believe hard enough. Maybe I'm missing something everyone else understands. But here's the truth almost nobody ever hears. You're not manifesting wrong, you're identifying wrong. Your life isn't responding to your goals, it's responding to who you believe you are while you pursue them. You don't manifest from desire. You don't manifest from intention. You don't manifest from effort. You manifest from identity. And identity is far quieter than most people realize. It's not what you say you want. It's what feels natural to expect. It's what you tolerate. It's what you assume will happen next. You can want abundance while identifying as someone who struggles. You can want confidence while identifying as someone who doubts. You can want freedom while identifying as someone who plays it safe. And when those two conflict, identity always wins. That's why progress feels fragile. That's why breakthroughs fade. That's why life keeps circling the same themes with different details. You're not failing at manifestation. You're manifesting perfectly from an identity that hasn't changed. And until that identity is questioned, updated, and consciously chosen, no technique will ever override it. But once you see this, once you recognize how identity quietly shapes outcomes, everything you've struggled with suddenly makes sense. And the solution stops being about doing more and starts being about becoming someone different from the inside out. What comes next is understanding how identity actually works and why it has more influence over your life than anything you consciously think or do. Identity is not something you announce. It's something you operate from. It's the background setting your mind uses to decide what feels realistic, what feels risky, and what feels me. This is why two people can use the same techniques and get completely different results. One sees momentum, the other sees resistance. One feels aligned, the other feels like they're forcing something. The difference isn't belief, it isn't discipline, it isn't intelligence, it's identification. Your subconscious is always asking, who am I allowed to be? What level feels normal for me? What outcome matches someone like me? And it answers those questions based on your identity, not your desire. If you identify as someone who struggles, ease will feel suspicious. If you identify as someone who gets overlooked, visibility will feel unsafe. If you identify as someone who has to work hard for everything, effortless opportunity will feel unreal. So even when opportunity appears, your nervous system hesitates. Not because the opportunity is wrong, but because it doesn't match the identity you're protecting. This is the hidden reason manifestation techniques fail. They speak to the conscious mind, but identity lives deeper. And identity isn't convinced by words, it's convinced by evidence. Not the evidence you post online, the evidence you give yourself through consistent behavior. This is why affirmations feel hollow when they don't match how you live. You can say, I am confident, while avoiding the very moments that would require confidence. You can say, I am abundant, while still identifying as someone who expects things to fall apart. The subconscious doesn't argue, it observes, and it quietly decides which identity is real. Until identity changes, manifestation will always feel like effort. But once identity shifts, manifestation feels natural, because you're no longer trying to create a life that conflicts with who you believe you are. You're simply allowing life to match you, And when that alignment happens, results stop feeling random. What comes next is the realization that identity is not fixed, it's trained. And once you understand how it was trained, you gain the power to retrain it deliberately. Most people think identity is something they discovered. In reality, it's something they learned. You weren't born believing certain things were for people like you. You weren't born assuming your limits were fixed. You weren't born expecting struggle or bracing for disappointment. Those patterns were absorbed from repetition, from emotional experiences, from watching how others lived, from what was rewarded and what was discouraged. Identity formed quietly, long before you ever tried to change your life. And because it formed gradually, it now feels like just who you are. But here's the shift that changes everything. Identity is not truth, it's familiarity. And familiarity is trainable. Your subconscious doesn't protect accuracy. It protects what feels normal, which means if struggle feels normal, peace feels foreign. If self-doubt feels familiar, confidence feels dangerous. If instability feels expected, stability feels fragile. This is why people unconsciously sabotage progress right after breakthroughs. Not because they're afraid of success, but because success doesn't match the identity they know how to live inside. The deep shift happens when you stop trying to force new results and start introducing your nervous system to a new sense of normal. Not all at once, not dramatically, but consistently. Identity doesn't change through declarations. It changes through repeated evidence. Evidence that says, this is safe now. This is allowed now. This is who we are becoming. And that evidence is created through small, aligned actions that contradict the old identity without overwhelming the system. You don't need to leap into a new life. You need to train familiarity. And once familiarity shifts, your identity follows. That's when manifestation stops feeling like effort and starts feeling inevitable. Because you're no longer asking life to give you something unfamiliar. You're becoming someone for whom those outcomes make sense. What comes next is how to begin that retraining process in a way your subconscious actually accepts. Changing identity doesn't happen by trying to become someone else overnight. It happens by choosing differently in moments that matter. Moments where the old identity would normally take over. Moments of hesitation. Moments of discomfort. Moments where it feels easier to retreat into what's familiar. This is where retraining begins, not by asking, who do I want to be someday, but by asking, what would the version of me I respect do in this moment? That question bypasses pressure. It doesn't demand perfection. It invites alignment. And alignment creates evidence. Evidence that tells your subconscious, we're changing. We can trust this direction. This is safe now. It might show up as speaking up once instead of staying silent, following through on one small promise, choosing presence instead of distraction, holding a boundary you usually abandon, allowing something good without questioning it. These moments may feel insignificant consciously, but subconsciously they're powerful. Because each one contradicts the old identity without triggering fear. And over time, those contradictions accumulate. You stop identifying as someone who only thinks about change. You start identifying as someone who moves differently. And once movement changes, identity follows naturally. This is how the new self is built, not through force, but through consistency. And consistency doesn't require motivation. It requires clarity. Clarity about who you are becoming and the willingness to act in small ways that support that identity. What comes next is the final realization, the moment where identity, manifestation, and outcome finally align. There comes a moment when you stop searching for new techniques and start recognizing something far more important. Your life has been responding to you with perfect accuracy, not to what you want, not to what you say, but to who you've been identifying as in the moments that mattered most. And when that becomes clear, something releases. You stop blaming yourself for not doing enough. You stop assuming you're broken. You stop chasing solutions that were never meant to work at the identity level. You realize you weren't failing at manifestation. You were succeeding at being familiar. Familiar with doubt, familiar with limitation, familiar with waiting, familiar with playing it safe. And familiarity feels like truth until you challenge it. But the moment you do, the moment you begin acting from the identity you respect instead of the one you inherited, your life begins to shift. Not dramatically, not overnight, but decisively. Because identity, once retrained, changes everything it touches. Your choices align. Your reactions soften. Your expectations rise. Your outcomes expand. Not because you forced the universe to respond, but because you stopped asking life to give you something that didn't match who you believed you were. You became congruent, and congruence is the real source of manifestation. From here forward, growth doesn't feel like effort. It feels like expression. Your life stops feeling like something you're trying to fix and starts feeling like something you're consciously shaping. Because the moment identity changes, manifestation stops being a mystery. It becomes the natural result of living as someone who expects more and is finally prepared to receive it.